Hey folks, it's Nate, and thanks for joining me once again as we look to the horizon. Back here with another one of my weekly writing vlogs, and I want to talk about all the status of all the projects. And it's not going to take very long because there's really only one project I worked on very much this week, and that is Burning Bright. I made it to the end of, well, almost the end of page 40. I think that's pretty good progress. Unfortunately, I expected to be at or close to the halfway point of this story by the time I got to page 40, and I'm not. I'm not even really that close. I would say I'm closer to 1/3 than 1/2. And that means this is going to wind up being longer than I thought it was. I would estimate now that this story may actually be somewhere around 150 pages, 120 to 150 pages, instead of the 80 to 100 pages I was originally thinking. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't want to fall into a trap. I was thinking of this story and a couple of potential sequels as novellas in length, so that when I had them all done, maybe I could package them as an omnibus and just release them that way. And I still want to do that, but I also don't want to limit the length of the story just because I think it shouldn't be that long. My estimation is that 100 to 150 handwritten pages is going to come out to somewhere between 40 and 60,000 words, probably closer to 60,000 than 40,000. And that is about the length of a short novel and not a novella. Now, I'm not sure really that that distinction is terribly meaningful anymore. The bottom floor of novel was kind of set by the publishing industry more as a matter of economics, what they could afford to print at the volume they printed for traditional publishing, say, 40 years ago, as opposed to what they can afford to do now with something like print on demand. And I think that really anything that isn't clearly a short story, so 5 to 10,000 words, that really has to focus on a single incident, anything longer than that, really the distinction between novella and novel may not be as meaningful. Now, I'm not saying we have to throw it out. I still think it is useful to have that word there. People like to categorize things, and they like that breakdown. And honestly, there are some stories that are really written as a single story, but are broken down into multiple books just because of their length. The classic example of that being Lord of the Rings. And I think that in today's age, Lord of the Rings would simply have been published as one story and not as multiple stories, simply because we don't cling as closely to that definition of what a novel is, and the economics of publishing have just changed so much. That said, I do want these stories to be as concise as possible. I want to tell the story as concisely as possible, and I want to hold myself to the standard of not being one of these rambly people who just throws in everything they think of. Definitely not looking at you, George R.R. Martin. Okay, I am. But I think that a lot of writers just kind of get lost in the wibbly-wobbly part of what they do. They like writing down all the things that occur to them and just, cutting out little things, just enough to make them feel like they've tried to be concise, and then publishing that. And you see it a lot in really well-known authors because editors become afraid to edit them. Stephen King is a great example of that as well. And I think that I don't want to do that. Obviously, I'm probably never going to be that financially successful, which is fine. Very few people are as financially successful as those people. But I want my emphasis to be not on the length, not on the word count, not on the idea of it being a novella or a novel, and more on my telling the story in its entirety with as much artistic integrity as I can. And if a novella is the length for that, that's fine. If a novel is the right length for that, then I will write a novel. I have written novels in the past. I have no problems with that as a medium. I just think that, as a rule, I'm more comfortable in that intermediate 30, 40,000 word target area. I can really tell the kind of concise, hard-hitting stories that I want to tell. So that's where I start setting my aim at. And maybe they will overshoot and turn into a novella. I have had a story that I thought would be a novella turn out to just be a short story. If you want to read that, it's called Emergency Surface, and it's on my blog, natechenpublications.com. You can look that up and have a read of something that I thought might be novella length and turned out to just be about a 5,000 word short story, give or take. And there's wiggle room in there, and I want to respect that. But I definitely had a target and a plan when I set out to write this, and it is not what I was planning on. There was more in here than I thought. There were more things that I wanted to address that I thought, and I think it's important to at least have a first draft where I address all of those things, and then if I want to cut stuff, I can. I don't know how much I can cut right now, but we'll see. We'll see. The editing process is its own beast. Speaking of which, I don't remember if I mentioned this last week or not, but I did get feedback on the last part of Night Train to Hardwick. I'm in the process of implementing that, and it's coming along pretty well. I got good feedback. It reminded me of some of my weaknesses as a writer and the importance of setting up scenes for the benefit of the audience. I do have a tendency, I think, to cut too much detail as I write, and often when I write, I simply forget to put in details because I have such a strong image of what I want to do already, and of course the audience does not. So I need to provide them with that image, and sometimes I forget. So that's mostly what I'm going to be focusing on as I edit and publish the last 4 chapters of Night Train to Hardwick. I have a few plans for what I will do after that. I usually take a few weeks off and write essays in between fiction projects. This is usually my ruminating on something I've learned about the art of writing since I last wrote essays, or what I learned from reading other pieces of fiction, or what I think of pieces of fiction. And I have a lot of different angles I usually take for essays, but I'll admit in the last few years, my desire to do that kind of commentary has kind of waned. I think I've said a lot of what I hope to say on a lot of those subjects already, and I don't have a whole lot to add now. And I have a hard time getting engaged with a lot of fiction that's coming out now. It seems very samey. We seem to be in a bit of a cultural slump right now, which is admittedly a topic in and of itself, which I will be writing about, I think, in my next series of essays. But beyond that, I don't have a whole lot to say that I don't think I could show better by doing right now. So I'm not probably going to write 5 to 10 essays, which is my usual window for one of these periods. I think I will instead be writing 3 or possibly 4, and then going back to fiction. And that will probably be when I start Burning Bright. And that's actually one of the issues with this turning out to be longer than anticipated. I had hoped to have it done before I actually started publishing it. We'll see if that happens. You never know. I have at least 2 months before that. So if I go at the rate of 10 to 12 pages a week, which I hope to, I could get to 150 pages in 3 months, 2 months if I really push it. And again, it may not actually turn out to be that long. We'll see. My final acts actually have a tendency to go by faster than I anticipate them to. It's usually the part I've thought about the most as I'm initially outlining a story, so they tend to have a longer chunk of outline than earlier parts of the story. So we'll see. There's wiggle room there. There's a lot to play by ear. But in the meantime, that's your writing update. Let me know down in the comments anything you might like to know about the outlining process, or the transforming it into a written product, or even about lengths of stories and what I think of them. And I may do a vlog on that later. In the meantime, there is a like button and a subscribe button down below you can use as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.